Time seemed to slow down in the arena as if the universe itself wanted to savor what was about to happen. Taeho moved with a fluidity that seemed impossible for someone. His size, his body flowing like water around stone as he shifted from his defensive position into something far more dangerous. Grix had expected the human to cower or flee after being publicly humiliated. Instead, he found himself looking into eyes that held no fear, no anger, and no mercy. There was only calculation, as if Taeho was solving a complex mathematical equation that happened to involve crushing skulls. The Chronari tried to react, but his massive size, which had always been his greatest advantage, suddenly became a liability. Taeho was no longer where Grix expected him to be. The human had moved with serpentine speed, positioning himself at exactly the right angle and distance for what came. Next, Grix swung his other massive fist down toward where Taeho had been standing, but struck only empty air. The human seemed to have vanished, only to reappear at the Chronari side, moving with precision that spoke of years of training and study that no one at the academy had suspected. What Taeho did next was not the desperate swing of an outmatched opponent or the wild attack of someone driven by rage. It was a demonstration of applied knowledge that turned biological study into devastating warfare. His right hand moved in a perfect arc, targeting a point on Grix's skull that the Chronari himself did not know existed. The spot was barely larger than a coin, located where three different bone plates met in the Chronari cranial structure. It was a weakness that evolution had hidden beneath layers of stone-like armor, but Taeho had found it in his anatomical studies and memorized its exact location on every Chronari he had encountered. His fist connected with surgical precision, channeling all of his momentum and training into a single point of impact. The sound was unlike anything the arena had ever heard before, a sharp crack that seemed to split the air itself, followed by the deeper sound of something fundamental breaking. Grix's towering form went rigid for a moment, as if he could not believe what had just happened. His small red eyes widened in shock and pain before rolling back in his head. The massive Chronari, who had seemed as immovable as a mountain, began to topple like a felled tree. The 8-foot alien crashed to the arena floor with a sound like thunder. His supposedly indestructible skull showed a spider web of cracks radiating out from the point of impact, while his body convulsed briefly before going completely still. Blood began to pool beneath his head as medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. The entire sequence from Taeho movement to Grix's collapse had taken exactly 2 seconds. The arena erupted in chaos as thousands of spectators tried to process what they had just witnessed. Many had missed the actual strike because it happened so fast and were demanding instant replays from the recording systems. Others were on their feet, shouting in their native languages, while academy officials rushed to restore order. Security forces surrounded Taeho with weapons drawn, but he made no attempt to resist or flee. He stood calmly beside his fallen opponent, showing no emotion as alien. Medics worked frantically to stabilize Grix. The human cadets. Blood still dripped from his lip, but otherwise he appeared completely unharmed. Commander Vex was among the first officials to reach the arena floor, his stone-like face showing an expression that might have been shock or disbelief. He looked from the unconscious Grix to the small human who had somehow accomplished the impossible. What did you do? The commander demanded. I defended myself, Taeho replied in the same calm tone he had used throughout the confrontation. Cadet Grix struck me without provocation during an official ceremony. I responded. Appropriate medical scanners were already examining Grix's injuries, and the results sent ripples of amazement through the gathering crowd. The Chronari skull, which was supposed to be virtually indestructible, showed fracture patterns that suggested incredible precision and force application. The medical team leader, an experienced Velfin doctor, shook his head in disbelief. How is this possible? He muttered while working to stabilize his patient. The impact point is exactly at the weakest junction of the cranial structure. It would take detailed anatomical knowledge and perfect accuracy to target such a spot. More security forces arrived to escort Taeho away, while medical teams transported Grix to the Academy Hospital. The crowd was still in chaos, with some species cheering for the unexpected human victory, while others demanded immediate punishment for what they saw as a vicious assault. As Taeho was led from the arena, he could hear the voices of news commentators already beginning their analysis of what would become Known as the most shocking moment in Academy history, their words echoed through the communication systems as they struggled to explain what they had witnessed. The human cadet appears to have targeted a specific weak point in Chronari Anatomy 1. Commentator was saying this suggests a level of biological knowledge that no one suspected humans possessed. Another voice added, "The precision required for such a strike is almost unimaginable. Chronari bone structure varies slightly between individuals. But this human somehow knew exactly where to aim in the cadet sections." Jiwoo and the other human students sat in stunned silence watching their friend being taken away. They had known Taeho was studying alien anatomy, but none of them had realized he was learning how to kill with surgical precision. The Galactic broadcast networks were already preparing special reports as the footage was analyzed frame by frame. Military experts from across the galaxy would spend hours studying those 2 seconds trying to understand how a small human had defeated one of the most physically powerful species in known. Space Federation officials began making urgent communications as they realized the implications of what had just happened. If one human cadet could do this with basic hand-to-hand combat, what did that say about humanity military potential? The species that everyone had dismissed as weak newcomers had just demonstrated abilities that no one had anticipated. In the medical center, Grix fought for his life while alien doctors worked around the clock to repair the damage to his skull. The injuries were severe enough to end his military career and possibly leave him with permanent disabilities. The proud Chronari warrior who had humiliated the human in front of thousands was now completely dependent on others for his survival. Meanwhile, Taeho sat in a detention cell waiting for the military tribunal that would decide his fate. He had been given basic medical treatment for his split lip, but otherwise ignored by the guards who seemed afraid to get too close to him. Word of his precise strike had already spread through the academy, and everyone was wondering what other secrets humanity might be hiding. The 2-second confrontation had changed everything. No longer would humans be seen as harmless weaklings who could be bullied without consequence. The galaxy had just learned that underestimating humanity was a potentially fatal mistake, and that sometimes the most dangerous opponents were the ones who appeared most harmless. As news of the incident spread across space, human colonies began celebrating while alien worlds demanded explanations. The small human cadet, who had just wanted to complete his demonstration, had accidentally started a revolution in how the galaxy viewed his species. The age of humanity as the weak newcomers was over, and the age of humanity as a force to be respected and feared had begun with a single precisely placed punch that lasted 2 seconds and changed the course of galactic history. The first week at the Academy passed like walking through a minefield where every step could explode. Taeho learned quickly that being human meant being a target for every alien cadet who wanted to prove their superiority. His alarm clock was sabotaged to make him late for morning formation. His combat gear mysteriously disappeared before training sessions, and his study materials were contaminated with substances that burned human skin. Grix seemed to be everywhere, watching and waiting. Like a predator stalking prey, the massive Chronari would appear in corridors just as Taeho passed by, forcing him to step aside or be trampled. In the cafeteria, Grix would stand behind the human table, making loud comments about the weakness of Earthborn species and how they contaminated the proud warrior traditions of the Academy. During combat training sessions, Instructor Krell, a scarred Velthran veteran, made it clear that humans were expected to lose every match. Taeho was paired against opponents twice his size and told to use standard Academy techniques that were designed for aliens with natural armor or energy manipulation abilities. When he adapted the moves to work better for human physiology, Instructor Krell accused him of not following proper form. "You fight like a coward," the instructor said after Taeho used speed and precision to avoid a Morlock cadet's crushing blows. "A true warrior meets force with greater force, not dancing around like a frightened animal." Taeho said nothing but continued to study every opponent he faced. He filled notebook after notebook with observations about alien fighting styles, weak points in their natural armor, and the timing of their attacks. Jiwoo found him in their room one night, surrounded by anatomical diagrams and combat analysis. "What are you doing?" Jiwoo asked, looking at the scattered papers. "Learning." Taeho replied without looking up. Every species here has advantages over humans, but they also have disadvantages. They do not even know Abuchiwu picked up a diagram showing Chronari bone structure with detailed notes in Teiho's careful handwriting. You are studying them like they are laboratory specimens. They study us the same way, Teiho said quietly. The difference is they think they already know what they will find, the harassment continued, but took on a more systematic approach. Grix recruited other cadets from different species, creating a network of tormentors who made human life miserable. Teiho found his locker filled with acid that ate through his spare uniforms. His training weapons were replaced with defective ones that could break during combat and alien. Cadets would surround him in corridors speaking in their native languages, while laughing, the academy instructor saw everything but did nothing. Commander Vex told the human cadets during a rare meeting that adversity built character and that if they could not handle academy life, they should return to their primitive planet, where they belong. The message was clear. Humans were on their own. 3 weeks into his stay, Teiho witnessed something that changed everything. He was walking to the library when he heard sounds of struggle from a side corridor. Looking around the corner, he saw Leah, human medical cadet, being cornered by 3 Zephyrian students who were using their energy manipulation to create painful electric shocks across her skin. The Zephyrians were laughing as Dayun tried to protect herself with her arms, but their energy attacks went right through her defenses. One of them was saying something about teaching humans their proper place in the galactic hierarchy, while another recorded the assault with a holographic device. Teiho stepped around the corner and cleared his throat. The 3 aliens turned to look at him with expressions of annoyance rather than fear. The largest Zephyrion had golden skin that crackled with electrical energy and eyes that glowed like small suns. This does not concern you, human, he said in accented standard. Go away before you join your friend in learning respect. Teiho walked slowly toward them, his hands relaxed at his sides. I think there has been a misunderstanding, he said calmly. Medical cadets are not supposed to be part of combat training. The Zephyrian laughed and raised his hand with energy dancing between his fingers. Perhaps you need the same lesson. What happened next was so fast that the recording device barely caught it. Teiho moved with fluid precision that seemed impossible for someone his size. His hand struck the Zephyrian's wrist at exactly the right angle to disrupt the energy flow, while his other hand pressed against a nerve cluster that sent the alien crashing to the ground in temporary paralysis. The other 2 Zephyrians backed away in shock as their leader writhed on the floor, unable to control his own electrical field. Teiho helped Dayun to her feet and checked her injuries before looking at the remaining aliens. I suggest you take your friend to the medical center, he said in the same calm voice. Energy feedback can cause permanent nerve damage. If not treated quickly, the aliens gathered their paralyzed leader and fled without another word. Dayun stared at Teiho with wide eyes. What did you do to him? She asked. I applied pressure to a nerve cluster that disrupts their electrical field, Teiho said as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Zephyrians depend on bioelectric energy for most of their abilities, but they have the same basic nervous system as most humanoid species. How did you know that? Dayun asked. I studied their anatomy, he replied simply, just like I study everyone here. Word of the incident spread through the academy within hours, but the story changed with each telling. Some said Teiho had used a hidden weapon. Others claimed he had some kind of genetic enhancement that gave him superhuman abilities. The truth that he had simply applied detailed biological knowledge was too boring for most cadets to believe. Grix heard about the incident and his anger reached new levels. The Chronari began following Teiho more closely, looking for any excuse to challenge him directly, but academy rules prevented cadets from fighting without official sanction, so Grix had to content himself with increasingly creative forms of harassment. During meal times, Grix would stand near the human table and tell stories about his father, Colonel Vex, who had died fighting in the Outer Rim Wars. The stories always ended with comments about how human weakness had forced other species to carry the burden of galactic defense, and how allowing humans into military academies dishonored the memory of true warriors. Teiho listened to these speeches without reaction, but other cadets began to notice the tension building. Some of the older students who had been at the academy for years recognized the signs of an approaching confrontation. The betting pool started quietly, with most aliens wagering on how quickly Grix would crush the small human butt A few cadets, particularly those who had witnessed Taeho's encounter with the Zephyrians, began to wonder if the outcome was as certain as everyone assumed they had seen something. In the human's movement and timing that suggested hidden depths, Jiwoo became increasingly worried as he watched his roommate prepare for what seemed like an inevitable clash. Taeho spent hours each day in physical training, but his exercises were unlike anything taught at the academy. Instead of building raw strength, he focused on speed, precision, and the kind of body control that came from years of martial arts discipline you cannot win against Grix in a straight fight, Jiwoo said one evening. I have seen him break training equipment that was designed to withstand Chronari strength. I am not planning to fight him, Taeho replied. I'm planning to end the fight. The difference in those words was subtle, but Jiwoo felt a chill as he heard them. There was something in Taeho's voice that suggested the quiet human cadet was far more dangerous than anyone at the academy realized. As the fourth week began, the tension reached a breaking point. Grix's harassment became more public and more aggressive. While Taeho remained calm and studied like a student preparing for the most important exam of his life, the other cadets sensed that something was coming, and the entire academy held its breath, waiting for the explosion that would change everything. Honor Day came to the Galactic Military Academy like a storm that had been building for months. The annual ceremony was the most important event in the academy calendar, where cadets demonstrated their skills before an audience that included military leaders from across the galaxy, diplomats from the Federation Council, and proud families who had traveled vast distances to watch their children. The main arena had been transformed into a showcase of military might. Giant screens displayed the academy motto in 12 different languages, while banners representing each species hung from the curved walls. The seating areas were packed with thousands of spectators, both in person and watching through galactic broadcast networks that would carry the ceremony to billions of viewers. Taeho stood with the other human cadets in the preparation area beneath the arena, listening to the roar of the crowd above them. He wore his dress uniform with its crisp lines and polished buttons, but the earth patch on his shoulder felt like it weighed 100 pounds. He had been selected to represent humanity in the final demonstration, a combat exhibition that would show the skills taught at the Academy. Jiwoo paced nervously nearby, checking his equipment for the 10th time, while the other human cadets sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. The selection of Taeho for the demonstration had surprised everyone, including the human cadets themselves. Most had expected an older student or someone with more obvious physical advantages. You do not have to prove anything to them, Jiwoo said for what felt like the 100th time. These ceremonies are just for show anyway. Ho adjusted his uniform one final time and checked that his combat knife was properly secured. Everything we do here proves something, he replied, whether we wanted to or not. The ceremony began with speeches from academy officials and distinguished guests. Taeho listened through the arena's communication system as speakers praised the traditions of military excellence and the bonds forged between different species in service to the greater galactic community. The words sounded hollow when he thought about the daily harassment and systematic discrimination that human cadets faced. Species after species took their turns in the arena, demonstrating the combat techniques and weapons mastery that made them valuable to the galactic military. The Chronari showed their incredible strength by crushing steel bars with their bare hands. The Velfin displayed their lightning reflexes by deflecting energy blasts, while blindfolded, the Zephyrian created beautiful and deadly light shows with their energy manipulation abilities. Each demonstration drew cheers from the crowd and respectful applause from the other species. Finally, the moment came for the human exhibition. Taeho walked through the tunnel that led to the arena floor, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The arena was even more impressive from the inside, with tiers of seats rising up on all sides, filled with alien faces that looked down at him with curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases barely concealed hostility. The arena floor was smooth metal that reflected the lights above, creating patterns that shifted as he moved. Taeho reached the center of the arena and stopped. According to ceremony protocol, he was supposed to wait for the announcement that would introduce him and explain the human demonstration, but before the words could be spoken, a familiar voice boomed across the arena. Wait, he commanded Grix. stepped out of the cadet section and walked down onto the arena floor. His massive form cast a shadow that seemed to swallow Tahoe as he approached the crowd. Murmured in surprise because interrupting the ceremony was strictly forbidden, but no Academy official moved to stop him. The Chronari cadet positioned himself directly in front of Tahoe, blocking his path to the demonstration area. His stone-like skin seemed to glow under the arena lights, and his small red eyes burned with hatred that had been building for weeks. "I cannot allow this farce to continue," Grix announced, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the arena. "This human stands here as if he represents something worthy of respect, but his very presence dishonors everyone who has died defending our galaxy." The arena fell completely silent as thousands of spectators leaned forward to hear every word the cameras focused on. The confrontation, broadcasting it live across the galaxy as Grix continued his speech. "Humans are weak, their technology is primitive, and their understanding of warfare comes from fighting each other on their single, backward planet. They have contributed nothing to galactic defense yet, demand to be treated as equals to species that have bled and died for centuries protecting civilization." Tahoe stood perfectly still during the speech, his expression calm and unreadable. He made no attempt to interrupt or defend himself, which seemed to frustrate Grix even more. The Chronari stepped closer until he loomed over the human cadet like a mountain of living stone. "Your species' reputation for cowardice is well known," Grix continued. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear clearly. "When the Outer Rim Wars threatened our borders, where were humans? When the Void Pirates attacked trade routes, where were humans? When my father died protecting a colony world from raiders, where were humans? The answer is nowhere, because humans hide behind the strength of better species while pretending to be warriors. You are parasites who take credit for victories won by the blood of your better." Tahoe finally spoke, his voice quiet but somehow carrying clearly through the arena. "I am sorry for your loss," he said simply. "Your father sounds like he was a brave warrior." Grix's face twisted with rage at what he saw as mockery. "Do not speak of my father, human. You are not worthy to breathe the same air as his memory." When Tahoe tried to step around him and continue to the demonstration area, Grix grabbed his shoulder with one massive hand. His grip was strong enough to crush human bones, but Tahoe did not cry out or struggle. He simply looked up at the towering alien with the same calm expression. "You will not perform this mockery of military tradition," Grix snarled. "I will not allow humans to pretend they belong among real warriors. Please let me pass," Tahoe said politely. "I have a demonstration to complete." The request seemed to push Grix beyond all control. His hand rose high above his head and came down in a slap that echoed through the arena like thunder. The impact sent Tahoe staggering sideways, and blood trickled from his lip where the stone-hard skin had torn flesh. The crowd gasped at the public assault, and several voices called out in shock or approval depending on their species' allegiance. Grix stood over Tahoe, laughing triumphantly as if he had just won a great victory. "There is your human warrior," he announced to the arena. "One slap, and he bleeds like the weak creature he is. This is what your species brings to the galactic military. Nothing but weakness and shame." Tahoe wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand and looked at it thoughtfully. The arena held its breath, waiting to see if he would flee in humiliation or cower before the massive Chronari. Many in the crowd expected him to break down crying or beg for mercy. Instead, Tahoe straightened up and looked directly into Grix's small red eyes for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. The two cadets stared at each other. The human seemed impossibly small next to the alien giant, but something in his posture suggested that the confrontation was far from over. "Thank you for the lesson," Tahoe said quietly. "Now let me show you one of mine." What happened next would be replayed on news broadcasts across the galaxy for years to come, analyzed by military experts and studied by combat instructors as an example of how quickly a fight could change from certain victory to devastating defeat. But in that moment, only Grix saw the subtle shift in Tahoe's stance, the way his weight moved to the balls of his feet, and the sudden focus in his dark eyes that transformed him from victim to predator in the space of a heartbeat. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, and Kim Tahoe pressed his face against the small window to see his new home for the next 2 years. The planet looked nothing like Earth, with its purple sky and 3 moons Hanging in the distance, giant crystal towers reached up from the surface like fingers trying to touch the star. Teho was 17 years old and smaller than most boys his age back on Earth, but he had always been quick with his hands and even quicker with his mind. His black hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes held a calm that most people mistook for fear. He wore the basic gray uniform of a human exchange cadet, with a small earth patch on his shoulder that felt heavier than it should. The other passengers on the transport were mostly alien traders and diplomats, who had ignored him completely during the 3-day journey. That was fine with Teho, because he spent the time reading everything he could about the different species he would meet at the Galactic Military Academy. His tablet was full of notes about alien biology customs and fighting techniques. When the ship landed at the Academy spaceport, Teho grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers down the ramp. The air on Nexus Prime was thinner than Earth air and had a metallic taste that made him cough. The gravity was also lighter, which made every step feel like he might bounce too high. The Galactic Military Academy spread out before him like a small city. The main building was a massive dome made of some kind of metal that changed colors in the alien sunlight. Smaller buildings surrounded it, connected by covered walkways where he could see cadets of different species moving between classes. A tall figure approached him, and Teho looked up to see his first Chronari in person. The alien stood 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. His face was angular with small yellow eyes and no visible nose, too. Small holes served as nostrils, and his mouth was a thin line that never seemed to smile. "This is Commander Vex," the Chronari said in heavily accented Standard Galactic, his voice deep and rough like grinding rocks. "You are the human exchange student." "Kim Tehois, Sir," Teho replied, standing as straight as he could. "Commander." Vex looked him up and down like he was examining a broken piece of equipment. "Humans are small," he said finally. "Your species was only discovered 50 years ago, and you think you can learn to be soldiers." Teho kept his expression neutral. "I am here to learn, sir." The commander made a sound that might have been laughter but held no warmth. "Follow me, human. Your species gets special treatment because the Federation wants to see if you are worth the trouble." They walked through the main entrance into a vast hall filled with cadets. The ceiling was so high that Teho had to crane his neck to see the top. Different species moved in groups, and he could identify most of them from his studies. The Velthran were tall and thin with blue skin and moved with fluid grace. The Zephyrian had golden skin that seemed to glow and crackling energy around their fingers. The Morlock were short and stocky with thick fur covering their bodies. Every single one of them was bigger than Teho. Followed him as he walked through the hall. Some cadets whispered to each other while others just stared. A few pointed at the earth patch on his uniform and laughed. The sound echoed off the high walls, making him feel even smaller. "Your dormitory is in Section 7, Commander," Vex said as they walked down a long corridor lined with doors. "You will share quarters with another human who arrived 3 months ago. Try not to embarrass your species more than necessary." The dormitory room was small, with 2 beds, a desk, and a window that looked out over the training grounds. One bed was already made with military precision, while the other had basic sheets folded on top. A young man sat at the desk reading from a holographic display. "This is Park Jiwo," Commander Vex said. "He will explain the rules and schedule. Dinner is at 1900 hours. Do not be late." The commander left without another word, and Teho stood awkwardly in the doorway until Jiwoo looked up from his reading. Jiwoo was about the same age as Teho, but looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. His uniform was clean but worn, and he had a small scar above his left eyebrow. "Welcome to paradise," Jiwoo said with bitter humor. "You can put your stuff in that locker. The bed is actually comfortable even if nothing else here." Istaho unpacked his few belongings while Jiwoo watched. "What should I know about this place?" Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment, then closed his holographic display. "Everything here is designed to prove that humans do not belong. The other cadets will test you constantly. The instructors will ignore harassment unless it becomes life threatening. The food will make you sick for the first week until your stomach adjusts." "That sounds challenging," Teho said calmly. Jiwoo stared at him. "You are either very brave or very stupid. Most humans who come here last about a month before requesting transfer back to Earth. What made you stay?" Teho asked. "Someone has to prove we belong here," Jiwoo said simply. "Even if it kills us, they went to dinner together in the massive cafeteria where hundreds of cadets sat at long tables organized by species. The human table had only 6 occupants, including Taeho and Jiwoo. The other 4 were older cadets who nodded politely but said little. The food was protein paste that tasted like metal and vegetables that looked like nothing from Earth. Taeho ate slowly, trying not to make faces at the strange flavors around them. The noise of different alien languages created a constant buzz of conversation that suddenly went quiet. A shadow fell across their table, and Taeho looked up to see 3 Chronari cadets standing behind him. The largest one was even bigger than Commander Vex, with scars across his stone-like face and small red eyes that burned with hostility. "You are the new human," the large Chronari said. "I am Cadet Grix. These are my squad mates. We wanted to welcome you properly." The other cadets at nearby tables had stopped eating to watch Ji-woo tensed beside him, but Taeho remained calm. "Thank you," he said. Grix smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "On my world we have a saying that the weakest members of the herd should stay in the back, where they belong. Humans seem to have forgotten this wisdom." Taeho met his gaze steadily. Perhaps different species have different ideas about strength. The cafeteria was now completely silent. Every cadet was watching the confrontation between the massive Chronari and the small human. Grix leaned down so his face was closer to Taeho. "We'll see about that, human. Your species' reputation for weakness is well known here. Do not think that Federation politics will protect you forever." The 3 Chronari walked away and conversation slowly resumed. Jiwoo let out a breath he had been holding. "That was Grix," he whispered. "His father was a war hero, and he thinks humans are an insult to military traditions. Seems like a pleasant fellow," Taeho said, continuing to eat his dinner. Jiwoo stared at him in amazement. "You just made an enemy of the most dangerous cadet in the academy, and you are making jokes." Taeho finished his meal and stood up. "I came here to learn, not to make friends. If he wants to teach me something, I am ready to be a student." They walked back to their dormitory. Jiwoo shook his head. "You really are crazy. But maybe that is exactly what we need here." That night, Taeho lay in his narrow bed listening to the strange sounds of an alien world outside his window. Tomorrow his real education would begin, and he suspected it would be nothing like what he had studied in his books. But he had not come this far to give up at the first sign of trouble. He thought about his family back on Earth and the letter his father had written before he left. "Son, you carry more than just your own hopes with you. Remember that how you act reflects on all of humanity. Show them what we are truly capable." Taeho closed his eyes and began planning. He would need to learn everything about his fellow cadets, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their customs. If he was going to survive here, he would need to be smarter and more prepared than anyone expected. The academy was designed to break weak cadets and send them home. But Taeho had not come here to be broken. He had come to prove that humans belonged among the stars, even if he had to do it one fight at a time. The investigation began within hours of the incident as Galactic Federation officials arrived at the academy in emergency transports. Their faces showed the kind of serious concern usually reserved for declarations of war or first contact with hostile alien species. What had happened in the arena was threatening to destabilize relationships between member worlds. Admiral Korth, a massive Morlock with gray fur and intelligent yellow eyes, led the investigation team. He had commanded fleets in 3 major conflicts and seen combat against every known hostile species, but he had never encountered anything like this. A human barely out of childhood had nearly killed one of the galaxy's most formidable warriors with a single strike. The first assumption was that Taeho had used some kind of illegal enhancement or hidden weapon. Federation investigators brought scanning equipment that could detect genetic modifications, cybernetic implants, and energy weapons down to the molecular level. They examined every inch of his body, looking for anything that might explain his devastating attack. The results were completely normal. Taeho was exactly what he appeared to be, an unmodified human male with no artificial enhancements or weapons. His physical capabilities were within normal parameters for his species, which made his precise strike even more mysterious. Dr. Sarah Chun, the human liaison to the academy, arrived on the next transport. She was a small woman with graying hair and tired eyes who had spent years trying to convince alien species that humanity deserved a place in galactic civilization. The incident had undone months of careful diplomatic work and put her in an impossible position I need to understand. What happened, she told Admiral Korth during their first meeting. The Federation Council is demanding explanations, and some member worlds are calling for humanity to be expelled from all military programs. Admiral Korth consulted his holographic notes. We have examined the human cadet thoroughly. There are no signs of enhancement or artificial augmentation, yet he accomplished something that should be impossible for his species. Dr. Chun requested permission to interview Taeho privately and was escorted to the detention facility where he had been held since the incident. She found him sitting calmly on his narrow bunk reading a book about Chronari history that someone had provided. How are you feeling? She asked, sitting across from him. Fine, Taeho replied, though his split lip was still healing. I have been treated well. She studied his face, looking for signs of stress or trauma, but found only the same calm expression he had worn throughout the confrontation. The guards are afraid of you, she said quietly. They think you might be some kind of secret weapon. I am just a student who defended himself when attacked, Taeho said simply. Dr. Chun leaned forward. Tell me about your training on Earth. What kind of martial arts did you study? Taeho was quiet for a moment, then began to speak about his childhood in Seoul, where his grandfather had taught him traditional Korean martial arts mixed with techniques from around the world. His training had emphasized precision over power, using an opponent's strength against them and finding weak points in any defense. My grandfather always said that size and strength mean nothing if you understand anatomy and timing, Taeho explained. He taught me that every living thing has vulnerable points if you know where to look. That explains the knowledge, but not the precision, Dr. Chun said. How did you know exactly where to strike? I studied everyone here, Taeho admitted. I have notebooks full of anatomical diagrams and weak points for every species at the academy. I wanted to understand my classmates better. Dr. Chun felt a chill as she realized the implications. Can you show me these notebooks? Taeho nodded and described where his research materials were hidden in his dormitory. When Dr. Chun retrieved them, she found hundreds of pages of detailed analysis that showed a level of biological understanding that most medical students would envy. Every major species was cataloged with precise notes about bone density, nerve clusters, pressure points, and structural weaknesses. This is incredible, she whispered while reviewing his work on Chronari anatomy. You found weak points that our own doctors did not know existed. It was not difficult, Taeho said. Chronari are very proud of their strength, but pride makes you blind to weaknesses. Every species here has advantages, but they also have disadvantages. They refused to acknowledge. Dr. Chun brought the notebooks to Admiral Korth, who examined them with growing amazement. The level of detail was extraordinary, but what impressed him more was the systematic approach. Taeho had not just studied individual species, but had developed general principles for analyzing alien biology. This changes everything, Admiral Korth said after reviewing the materials. We have been measuring human capabilities by the wrong standards. The investigation expanded to include interviews with other human cadets and academy staff. A pattern emerged that no one had noticed before. Humans were not trying to match alien species in raw physical ability. Instead, they were developing techniques that used intelligence, precision, and adaptability to overcome superior strength. Wu told investigators about Taeho nightly training sessions, where he practiced strikes against anatomical models with millimeter precision. Other human cadets revealed similar preparation, focusing on speed, accuracy, and knowledge rather than brute force. The most shocking revelation came when investigators analyzed Academy security footage from the past months. They discovered dozens of incidents where human cadets had used precise techniques to defend themselves against larger opponents. Most had been dismissed as lucky accidents, but the pattern showed systematic application of biological knowledge. Commander Vex was interviewed extensively about his treatment of human cadets. His responses revealed unconscious bias that ran throughout the Academy administration. Humans were expected to fail because they were physically weaker, and when they succeeded, it was attributed to luck or cheating rather than skill. We never considered that their small size might be an advantage in certain situations, Commander Vex admitted reluctantly. They move differently than we expected, and their techniques are unlike anything in our training manuals. Dr. Chun compiled all the findings into a comprehensive report that she presented to Admiral Korth and the investigation team. The conclusions were revolutionary and would reshape Galactic understanding of human capabilities. Humanity has evolved as persistence hunters, she explained, using intelligence and endurance to overcome larger, stronger prey. These same traits make them formidable opponents when properly motivated. They study their enemies with scientific precision and adapt their tactics accordingly. The report noted that human martial arts traditions spanning thousands of years had created fighting techniques specifically designed to defeat larger opponents. Every human culture had developed methods for finding and exploiting weaknesses in superior forces. Most significantly, the investigation revealed that humans had been quietly studying their alien classmates not out of malice but as a survival mechanism. They were doing what their species had always done, adapting to their environment by understanding everything around them. Admiral Korth read the final report with growing concern and admiration. The implications were staggering. If human cadets could accomplish this much with basic training and academy resources, what could trained human soldiers do with proper equipment and support? We have been making a grave error, he told his staff. We measured humans by Chronari standards and found them wanting, but they are not failed Chronari, they are successful humans. The investigation concluded that Taeho had acted in legitimate self-defense using skills that were natural to his species but unknown to Galactic civilization. The incident was ruled justified, but the broader implications sent shockwaves throughout Federation. Space military analysts began reevaluating human potential, while recruitment officers prepared new assessment criteria that would properly measure human capabilities. Humanity was no longer seen as the weakest member of the galactic community, but as a species with unique and potentially dangerous talents. The quiet human cadet, who had just wanted to complete his academy training, had accidentally revealed that his entire species was far more formidable than anyone had imagined. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. 3 months after the incident, Grix woke up in the medical center with a splitting headache and a completely different perspective on life. The massive Chronari, who had once believed in the superiority of brute strength, now struggled to remember simple words and needed assistance to walk. The precise strike that had nearly killed him had saved his life in an unexpected way. The brain damage from his injuries had forced him to rebuild his thinking patterns from the ground up. As his mind healed, he began to see the world differently. The arrogance and prejudice that had driven him to attack Taeho seemed like memories from another person entirely. He spent hours each day in rehabilitation, learning to speak properly again while contemplating how wrong he had been. Dr. Chun visited him regularly as part of her research into the incident. She found a changed individual who bore little resemblance to the aggressive cadet who had publicly humiliated a human student. Grix asked about Taeho, constantly wanting to understand how someone so small had possessed such devastating knowledge. I was blind, he told her during one of their sessions, speaking slowly because of his speech difficulties. My father died fighting enemies, he understood. But I nearly died fighting an enemy. I refused to understand. The military tribunal that reviewed Taeho case had cleared him of all charges after examining the evidence. The security footage clearly showed Grix as the aggressor, while Taeho had acted in legitimate self-defense. The 2-second response was ruled proportionate to the threat, even though the results were more severe than anyone had anticipated. But the real impact of the incident went far beyond one cadet fate. The Galactic broadcast of the confrontation had been watched by billions of beings across Federation space, and the reactions varied dramatically depending on species and political alignment. Human colonies erupted in celebration as news of Taeho victory spread. People who had felt ashamed of their species' supposed weakness suddenly held their heads high. Young humans began enrolling in martial arts classes, while older ones shared stories of their own combat training that they had kept secret on alien worlds. The reaction was more complex. Species that had dismissed humans as harmless began reevaluating their assumptions. Military strategists from every major civilization started analyzing human combat potential, while diplomats worried about The implications for existing treaties: the Kronari government initially demanded justice for the attack on one of their citizens, but the investigation findings changed their position entirely. When they learned that Grix had publicly assaulted an opponent half his size, they began to distance themselves from the incident. Their military leadership quietly began studying human fighting techniques. Admiral Korth submitted his final report to the Federation Council with recommendations that would reshape military policy throughout known space. The document was classified at the highest levels, but its conclusions leaked quickly through diplomatic channels. Humanity represents a unique strategic asset, the report stated. Their combination of intelligence, adaptability, and precision-based combat techniques fills critical gaps in our defensive capabilities. We recommend immediate expansion of human recruitment and specialized training programs. The Galactic Military Academy underwent major reforms within 6 months of the incident. Commander Vex was reassigned to a desk position, while new policies prohibited harassment of cadets based on species characteristics. The curriculum was expanded to include human martial arts and precision combat. Techniquesta became the first human to receive the Galactic Medal of Excellence, a decoration usually reserved for officers who distinguish themselves in actual combat. The ceremony was held in the same arena where he had defeated Grix, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of facing a hostile crowd, Teho was greeted by representatives from dozens of species who wanted to understand human capabilities better. The Federation president, a dignified Velthran female, presented the medal while cameras broadcast the event across the galaxy. Cadet Kim Teho, she announced, your actions have demonstrated that true strength comes in many forms. You have shown that knowledge, precision, and courage can overcome any disadvantage. The academy that had once been a place of constant harassment for human cadets became a center of learning where different species studied each other's combat techniques. Human enrollment increased dramatically while other species began requesting cross-training in human methods. Jiwoo graduated 6 months later and was immediately recruited by Federation intelligence, who had realized that human analytical skills were perfectly suited for strategic planning. He became part of a new program that paired human officers with alien commanders, creating teams that combined different species' strengths. Lee Dayun, the medical cadet who Teho had helped during the Zephyrian incident, became the Academy's first human instructor, teaching alien anatomy to cadets of all species. Her classes were among the most popular in the curriculum as students learned to see their opponents and allies in completely new ways. The betting pools that had once focused on how quickly humans would fail were replaced by complex analyses of human tactical innovations. Alien cadets who had once mocked human weakness began studying their techniques and requesting training. Partnerships. Grix's recovery took nearly a year, but he eventually returned to active duty with a medical discharge and a new career as a rehabilitation counselor. His experience had taught him that strength without wisdom was useless, while knowledge combined with precision could accomplish miracles. He became an advocate for species integration and used his own defeat as an example of why prejudice was strategically fool.